naturalism is generally just the disbelief that anything that is outside the natural, observable, predictable world is not true. So it encompasses a lot. So the book, we got permissions. Page 33.
Pictures, yeah.
Yeah. It was during the publishing process. It was a question. Do we need to include these pictures? There were a couple. There's one that's just two snowmen, and then there's another one that's Calvin and Hobbes. And did you know that Calvin? You know that those are names of philosophers, right?
No.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes. He's a modernist.
Okay.
So is he a modernist officially? He's a philosopher with some competing ideas.
Yeah.
So, which is funny.
Yeah,
I never knew that either.
That's funny.
But anyway, the snowman on page 31, one snowman is saying to the other, don't be absurd. Nobody made us. We evolved by chance from snowflakes. And it's so funny because you look at these snowmen, that's a ridiculous
absurd,
thing to
right.
think that wasn't intelligently done.
Yeah.
By the hand of something else, a creative hand. And yet, this is the argument around creation.
Yeah.
And so some of the ideas that people have a hard time with under the naturalist umbrella are creation, evolution, and bodies and souls. And so just the idea and miracles. So just the idea of all of those things, we're just going to sort of fly by.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do 2 episodes on naturalism because it's a big one. So when we think about creation, I think that having the cosmological argument, at least in some way seated in our mind, is helpful in the conversations that people have about creation. And to be honest with you, I think that you have to have the creation conversation first with the naturalist. Because if they don't believe there is a God, a creator, intelligent design, there's really no place to go with the rest of it. But if you can get them to buy in that it's possible, there is an eternal, all-powerful being, then you can build or start to deconstruct some of the other ideas that are founded on there isn't. And so this is chronological as well as, global argument. So the Kalam the argument really has...
I can say it helps. It helps. It helps to cement it in people like my brains.
Kalam.
It does.
First of all, I'm going to say, however I say it, it is said better on the video series that partners with this study guide. There's a really beautiful, and the woman who presents it has a nice accent.
Well, I have to say, when I watched the video, and even as I read it, I thought, okay, I understand
that makes
it.
sense.
But then it was like, okay, the word just goes.
Yeah, that's okay that the word goes. But if we can hold on to the sort of the 3 things.
Yeah.
So the first one is that everything that began to exist had a cause. Nothing begins to exist without, nothing begins from nothing. So everything that began to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist. There's scientific evidence. Everybody accepts the Big Bang. The universe had a start. The universe is not eternal.
As we can see it declining, which is interesting,
well,
right?
Really how they figured that out is that it's expanding. And if it's expanding, then it expanded from a point.
Yeah.
So if the universe began, it had to have a cause. So the universe was caused. Then what's the natural thing that results from that argument? There had to, some people call it the uncaused cause, which I don't love that word because it seems to double back on it, circle back on itself. But if the universe had a start everything that began to exist had a cause. If there is an egg, there was previously a chicken. Mm-hmm. Everything that began to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist. Really, very few people are going to say to you, the universe always just was. There are some, but not many.
Yeah.
Because the Big Bang is widely accepted.
Mm-hmm.
If the universe began, it had to have a cause. That's where people get jammed up. What caused the universe?
Right.
What was it? Some people say it was so tiny. Like, how did it start?
Mm-hmm.
The argument develops itself by saying, in response to a potential argument, it just did what I said to you about the meteorological phenomenon. If that were true,
mm-hmm.
and it just did, why doesn't that happen all the time?
Yeah.
Now, excluding the multiverse, which I love talking about the multiverse.
Right.
I seriously do. But that's a conversation for a Marvel podcast and not...
Right. Sure,
which I don't host.
Yeah.
But if universes were just going to pop up, why haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
Now, people might be theoretical and say, well, we just haven't discovered them yet. That's okay. Fine. Great. That may all be true. But how do we define what we're existing in right now? Which as far as we know, is unique, began, and what caused that? And so that's where we can build the idea of a creator. And at that juncture of a conversation, you don't have to get into the personhood of God or the personal work of Christ. That is way down the road.
Yeah.
All we're looking for is it possible that there is an eternal, all-powerful being that was the cause? Is it possible?
Yeah.
And that takes time because of what you said before.
Yes,
is you're really deconstructing something that matters to them.
Yeah.
So be gentle about it.
Yeah.
But is it possible? You're going to love this. It's not in the book, but there's another, it might be in the book. There's another argument. It's called the ontological argument. Anselm is an old guy. Long time ago, he sort of put this forward. The ontological argument is harder. I'm not going to do a good job. I'm not going to do it justice here, but it also plays in the possibility of. So it's just about opening people's eyes to the possibility. Mm-hmm. People don't like to say that something's possible that they don't believe in, but you can gently, prayerfully ask God to help their eyes be open to the possibility of a created moment, like this was created. First of all, does that help simplify Kalam? Everything that began had a cause.
Yes.
The universe began, therefore the universe has a cause.
Yes.
That's really it.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
By the way, you and I are both super fans of C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And I think he does an amazing job. But I do know that it's a challenging read in Mere Christianity. I loved it. And that would probably be the super simplified version of the first 3 chapters, I think, of his book. But this is an excellent topic, and timing is really great as well. I have a young family member. I don't want to give too many details, but a young family member who just started going to youth group in a family that's not believers. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm beyond excited,
stoked.
And so he asks some vague questions, and the idea of Jesus is starting to come to him, and yet the creation question got put on the table. Mm-hmm. And it's a hard question. People that they trust and they know are brilliant minds over the years have really developed this evolution explanation. And so even when
evolution, by the way, is different than creation.
Yes. And we probably have similar, if not the same theories, thoughts on a lot of that
for me, evolution is what happened after creation.
Right.
How did has the history of this world progressed?
Yeah.
That's evolution. What I'm talking about is how did this world, how did this universe come into being?
Right.
So I just wanted to separate those just for a second.
Which is, I think, is an excellent point. I think that's a
and by the
great
way,
to put
you
it.
can, that's a thing. That's a tool.
Yeah.
Back them up.
Yeah.
Back them up. Like if someone's like, well, I'm jammed up on, like I did with my nephew who said, can God create a stone even he can't lift?
Yeah.
Back them up.
Right.
Can God create?
Yeah.
So if you're, I'm sorry for interrupting,
No,
but
that's
if
right.
your person is like, well, I'm just really stuck on evolution, back them up.
Yeah.
Okay, we can get to how has the world progressed from the time it started? How has this universe progressed? Can we talk about how it started?
Right.
That's what I'm saying to
And
you. I
recognizing
think
that
the way
creator
that this
began
book
it.
is written
Right.
and the way that I'm trying to run us through this series is very intentional with respect to you have to start at the beginning to build a foundation.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to start with you in the middle,
back 'em
rewind
up.
it,
which is that's a really great tool to use because that also helps us resettle ourselves, right? Because sometimes when you get that question, can he make a rock that is so big that he can't lift it up, right? So can he make a rock heavier than he can lift? I forget the exact words, but essentially that's the argument, right? You're right. We got to back it up.
Yeah.
Is he a creator?
Yeah. No. So in my nephew's case, it was, can God create?
Yeah.
In your person's case, it's, did God create?
Right. Right. And so we're stuck in that, monkeys from man argument.
You don't have to have it.
Right.
You should have it when the time comes.
Sure.
So that's why I think Kalam is really useful. Everything that began had a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe had a cause.
Yeah. And so you start at the beginning.
Yes. You
Right?
have to.
You go back and
guess
start
what
at the
else
beginning.
starts at the beginning? The Bible.
Right.
There's a reason.
Yes.
God is building his argument for himself.
Right. Right. I know. It's so
Here's
true.
what
It
I
is
did
so
first.
True. Yeah. Right. I know. And I've had that where people go, you should go to this first. And I'm like, well, there is a beginning. There is, I had to come to that later.
It's gentle.
Yeah.
Like you have to be gentle when you say, I'm not going to argue with you about that. We're going to talk about this.
Right.
You have to, and that's why I think asking better questions.
Yes.
That's sort of when I talk about disarm and deconstruct, it is housed in the soft surroundings of better questions. Because when we start to make statements instead of asking questions, we begin an argument.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would just say,
Yeah.
ask it different. Can I ask you a different question?
Right. So you're not ignoring their question, which is really important, right? Because they're asking you a question sometimes because they want to be heard, sometimes because they want to argue, but sometimes because they want to be heard and they're struggling with that particular concept, right? But you're saying, I want to answer that.
Yeah.
But they're not even in a place necessarily where that can be answered yet. Like you said, they're not in the Bible. So I don't want to say Adam and Eve created,
Right.
I don't want to say like, God made him out of dust. And they're like, okay.
Right.
That's where you are with God.
Right.
So because to them that's so foreign.
Yeah.
that
And
to back
kooky
it up-
was the word
Kooky.
you used.
Yes.
I like
Cookies.
it.
I
I
that
think a gentle way to do that is to just validate, which is what again, disarm, deconstruct. Disarm, deconstruct. So if I'm coming to you, this is how I do think about it. If I come to you and I have a machine gun in my hand and I'm pointing the machine gun at you, what's the first thing you and I need to do? We need to put that gun down.
Yeah.
Then we can have a conversation about what made you pick up the gun in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's just negotiation tactic 101.
Yeah.
It's the same in normal conversation. So we disarm by saying, my big tool for disarming is creating partnership. So I would say to a person like that, that's a valid question. It's a really good question. I would even say I've grappled with that question myself and just say, I would love to talk to you about that. For me, what has to come before that is this. Can
Yeah.
we talk about that for a minute? Not
Yeah.
to just, and say, and like ask permission. That's another one I do a lot
Yeah.
is I ask permission. Can we, instead of forcing someone to shift gears, I'll say, can I hear your thoughts first? That's a great way to do it. Can I first hear your thoughts on X, like the creation, the Kalam? Okay. We wouldn't say it, but
Right.
that anything that began to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause.
Right.
I'm going to take the person to that place with questions, leading questions for sure, but gentle questions that validate, disarm, and create partnership. Like, let's journey through this together. So there are gentle ways to do it. Like, this is the rub. There's one way, which is, well, I'm not going to talk to you about that because you talking about that is ignoring this.
Right.
And that's just like this.
Yeah.
So it's just this gentle redirecting.
Yeah.
That can be highly useful because when someone feels like they are a conversational partner, that you are on the journey with them together, or you're sharing the journey that you've already taken, people are invested in that.
Yeah.
As much as we want to hold our own identities as a culture, we want to not give up our identity. We are also a people who love a story. We want to hear each other's stories. Tell me your story.
Yeah.
And so if I share with you that this was part of my own journey, this is part of my story, I've said this a million times. People can argue with your argument, but they can't argue with your testimony.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where you lead them to, I've looked into this.
Yeah.
I'd like to share what satisfied me. And maybe you might also find it satisfying. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to say no?
I mean, and I love the gentleness of it. So I obviously joked with you earlier, I'm not black and white, I'm shades of gray. And so I'm more of a soft sciences, right? Like, I love community. I love the way the brain works. I love the way emotions work and things like that. And so even that, like, and I believe that we're called to that. I believe that that's, God calls us to that when he calls us to community and unity among believers and things like that. And I think that develops such a better relationship with people.
question.
And I think to my own home, and we've discussed and shared this before, and sometimes we're harsh with each other deliberately because there's a funniness to it, right? There's something about that. And so just even thinking about disarming some of that and how I grew up with that and how I need to disarm some of that in my nature, the responsibility of a Christian is very, very big. Because my responsibility is not to make them agree with me and believe that I'm right. My responsibility is to love them enough to show them the truth.
That's a great point. Because a lot of times when we think about apologetics, making an argument, giving a reason, we want to think that we are the ones who did the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the truth is, God's doing the thing. God wins hearts. The Spirit wins hearts. We may be a tool that God uses, and we should be the sharpest tool we can be by maintaining ourselves in a healthy way and presenting ourselves in a healthy and loving way. The best tools, I believe, are love and truth. And you can't abandon one in favor of the other and still be a gospel carrier legitimately. You have to do love and truth in balance. And God does the work. And so what you just said is a really, really great reminder that it's really not on us. We do have a responsibility to carry ourselves properly according to the truth of the gospel and the way that God has changed our lives. But we don't have a responsibility really ever to win someone to faith.
Yeah.
We don't. That's not, it's God's. We cast the net on the water and God puts the fish in the net.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible. And so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.